Entertainment every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network 106.1 FM on Thursdays 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
You have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
You are about to enter the arena of real news and factual commentary on The Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Now, here is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
Joining me in the Tan Talk studio are my two co-hosts today, both attorneys just when we need them most. First, Kevin Carey, also a former circuit court judge, and our Voice of Reason senior political analyst, Gary Gibbons. Gentlemen, I'm sure you both want to weigh in on the Bondi hearing and the fact that she was actually accused of committing perjury at her Wednesday hearing in front of Congress.
Well, she did commit perjury. She was answering questions from Ted Lieu, Ed, and Gary about there's no evidence at all of any potential criminal wrongdoing, which is not the case. There's the proceedings by the 13-year-old California woman. At 13, I would say you're more a girl than a woman, alleging that he had raped her. Very, very serious charges. So that was perjury. So maybe I hope there will be a day reckoning for her on a more general level. I've never seen a hearing like that in my 67 years. I guess my first 10 years, I wasn't following Senate hearings or congressional hearings, but since Watergate, which was, 73, 74, as a judge, as a lawyer, that's not how you conduct yourself. And she's a lawyer. She's Attorney General of this country, and she showed no respect for that oversight committee, which does have oversight abilities. That was the House Judicial Committee. But I was proud of the Democrats. They were prepared because they'd seen her antics before the Senate Judiciary Committee a few months ago, and knew that she would have her little book with his personal attacks. It was just about, as they say, an audience of one with Trump, and it was just despicable.
Well, Lou set this whole thing up by pointing out that Trump had attended numerous parties with Epstein. He must have known what was going on, and he was absolutely stunned that nobody had ever been brought to trial or even charged with anything, even though there was over 1,000 victims of this thing. And that's what led him to assert that she was perjuring herself, and that she should resign. So let's hear the full context of this part of what he said, which is really astonishing.
Like former Prince Andrew, Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to know, were there any underage girls at that party or at any party that Trump attended with Jeffrey Epstein?
This is so ridiculous, and that they are trying to deflect from all the great things Donald Trump has done. There is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime. Everyone knows that. This has been the most transparent presidency. He's the one that asked that those files.
I'm reclaiming my time. I got your answer. You said there's no evidence.
Trump asked
Chairman, please stop the clock.
Stop the clock. The legislation.
Time belongs to the gentleman from California.
Okay. I'm going to put up another document from a witness who called the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, because I believe you just lied under oath. There is ample evidence in the Epstein file.
Don't you ever accuse me of a crime.
I believe you just lied under oath, and this is all on videotape. You said there's no evidence of a crime. I'm showing you, here is a witness statement who called into the FBI's Threat Operations Center. He drove Donald Trump around in a limo. He overheard what Donald Trump said to Jeffrey on his cell phone. He was so angry, he was going to stop a limo and hurt Donald Trump. And he met a girl who said she was raped by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She later had her head blown off, and officers at the scene said that could not have been suicide. No one at the Department of Justice interviewed this witness. You need to interview this witness immediately. Epstein should rot in hell, so should the men who patronized this operation. And as we say here today, there are over 1,000 sex trafficking victims, and you have not held a single man accountable. Shame on you. If you had any decency, you would resign right after this hearing concludes.
The gentleman has expired.
But she resigned my foot. She should go straight to the nearest federal penitentiary and check herself in for life, as far as I'm concerned. Gary?
You know, the Attorney General of the United States is the head of the Department of Justice, and she holds nearly absolute authority to supervise, direct, and operate the department's components, including the FBI, the DEA, U.S. attorneys, and several other branches. I actually this morning Googled what the organizational chart is for the Department of Justice and everybody that is under Pam Bondi's control. And it includes, you know, the ones I mentioned, and then also the Office of Legal Policy, the Civil Division of the Justice Department, the Enforcement of Natural Resources, the Tax Division, the Antitrust Division. And guess what? There's an Office on Violence Against Women that she is in charge of. And yesterday, the most despicable thing that I saw, and there were a lot of them, but the worst was when she was asked to turn around and look at those victims in the eye. And she didn't have to apologize to them. She was asked to apologize to them, but she wouldn't even look them in the eye. And she wouldn't even, and then they asked them to all raise their hands if they have been contacted by the Justice Department, if they have not been contacted by the Justice Department. And every one of them raised their hands. And if she was competent at all to do this job, she would have said, I have a staff person here. She has 117,000 people that work for her. Okay. And she had a lot of people there to put together that damn binder of all the opposition research for people that, you know, were asking her questions so that she could get a soundbite that would look great on Fox News or on Newsmax or something. But instead, her job is to protect. There's an Office of Violence Against Women that she's in charge of. And she could have asked somebody from that office to be there today yesterday to talk to those women and get their information and say, we will be in touch with you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Instead, those victims were told that the important thing in their life should be the Dow. And the Dow hit 50,000, and she said dollars.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so she knows so much about the Dow. And so instead, she's, you know, should those victims wake up today and say, you know, well, let me go check how the Dow's doing? No, they deserve to be listened to. And that's what's going to sink Pam Bondi's legacy for the rest of her life, is the fact that she, as a woman, just those women that were standing there, you know, begging her for help. All of those women have asked from day one, show us our files. They've subpoenaed the files. They've asked for, their lawyers have asked for the files. They don't give them to them. Not only are they, you know, violating the law that they're supposed to give them to Congress, they won't give them to the victims.
But you got to admit, she's right when she says that the Trump administration is the most transparent in history. It's the most transparently corrupt administration, probably more corrupt than all previous administrations combined in history. Kevin?
You know, one of the most, the reference I heard that I enjoyed the most was it referred to Bondi as an over-caffeinated mean girl, which I thought was a pretty precise reflection. We could spend the entire 2 hours on Pam Bondi, and we won't. But there's a unique perspective we have because we know her. She's from Tampa, and we know her as lawyers. And this was not the person she was, 25 years ago. But I think yesterday was a defining moment. I really do. I think that that visual of the victims of pedophiles standing up with their hands raised and Bondi not even acknowledging them at all, and from that she was told not to acknowledge that. I mean, she was like a soldier in war, and she could not even convey any sense of sympathy for these pedophile victims. So I think it was very much a defining moment for Bondi. But I want to talk a minute as a former trial judge. This was a hearing. It's called a congressional hearing, just like you have judicial hearings. And there's a way you conduct yourself at a hearing. This is not a food fight. And if I were any judge was having a hearing with what happened, she would be held in contempt for not answering the questions. It was just horrible to watch. So again, we could go on, but she doesn't answer questions. Then she's got a personal attack on everybody on the Democratic side that she's prepared with her notebook to call Raskin a washed up lawyer. Raskin, who's a Harvard Law School graduate and a professor at American University School of Law. It's not true. But even if it were true, it's beneath the dignity of that office. You would never even Bill Barr, who had his faults as Attorney General under Trump, would never have acted that way. Elliot Richardson, who was Nixon's Attorney General, that quit as opposed to doing what Nixon wanted him to do. That was part of the Saturday Night Massacre in October of 1973. Any of these attorneys general would have had more dignity than that. That is not how you conduct yourself.
And not only is she refusing to talk to the victims and do any investigation of any future crimes that have occurred, and it's clear that there are lots of people that should be charged in this whole situation. She goes, "Oh no, we're done with that." They turn around in the same week and they try to indict 6 sitting members of Congress, 4 in the House and 2 senators who were military veterans who did a 90-second video about 6 weeks ago that said, or maybe it was a little earlier, do not, you have an obligation as a member of our armed forces not to follow an illegal order. And that's just a restatement of what the Military Code of Justice says. And here they are as members of Congress that have the ability to comment on things, and it's their duty to actually do oversight of the military. They're being charged with crimes by Pam Bondi's Justice Department, and yet she won't prosecute pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
It's disgusting.
Well, we've talked about it. A grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. Again, Trump makes news by grand juries are not throwing out these cases. They wouldn't indict as to those 6 legislators. Letitia James, they threw that out. There was no indictment from the grand jury. Keep in mind, again, for our listeners, there's no defense counsel, there's no judge. When all they get, which is all the grand jury gets, is what the prosecutors thinks the case is about, and they still reject it. These aren't lawyers; these are normal citizens rejecting it.
These are people that get a subpoena saying show up for jury duty, and it's a grand jury, and they have the common sense to see what's going on. They've seen the weaponization of this Justice Department, and they're saying, no, this is wrong. These are not crimes.
The Democrats, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let's listen to Representative Jason Crow reacting to the news that the Department of Justice failed to indict him and the other members of Congress who produced that video advising American troops they should not obey illegal orders. They should have tried to indict a ham sandwich, in which case they probably would have succeeded, right?
Every American should be raving pissed that they're using taxpayer dollars in the public trust of the Department of Justice to go after political opponents, weaponizing their justice system, who's supposed to be going after real criminals and keeping our communities safe. That's one. 2, if these do think they're going to intimidate and bully me and get me to back down from doing my duty, they have another thing coming. I went to war 3 times for this country in Iraq and Afghanistan as an Army Ranger and paratrooper. I took an oath. It is a lifetime oath.
What do you think it says, firstly, that federal prosecutors made this attempt to indict you guys, and then secondly, that a grand jury rejected it? I mean, what does it say about both the administration and the grand jury and the charges that were attempted to be levied against you?
The story is not that a grand jury rejected it. Of course, a grand jury rejected it because it's a damn joke, right? The real story here is that they even tried in the first place, that they have a bunch of stooges and clowns at DOJ who are just willing to do Donald Trump's bidding, right? That is scary. And it's also an injustice to every American. Thank you.
So remember, if your law professor tells you can indict a ham sandwich, walk out and go to a better school, because you can't without evidence.
If you don't need,
Go ahead.
If you don't need doubt about the fact,
Hopefully they'll put that myth to bed once and for all.
if you need doubt that Pam Bondi was nothing more than Trump's personal attorney as opposed to being the attorney general, you just had to watch that hearing yesterday. But back on this issue with these 6 legislators who the grand jury rightfully rejected those frivolous charges. Keep in mind too, as to Mark Kelly, who's a senator, they talked about having his pension taken away and having his rank reduced because of treason. The levels they will go, there's no level, there's no boundary to it. And I did hear some Democrats last night talking about if and when I think they will take control of the House after November. I think there's going to be a big blue wave, and it's just going to get worse by what happened yesterday. Looking into their attempt to pursue indictments against these 6. I mean, I think there will be and needs to be accountability for what's happened. It's ironic that Trump was saying that that Biden's had weaponized the judicial, the Justice Department. That's all that he has done. This has all been about retribution, and Bondi just sits there like a doll and just does whatever she is told to do.
Guess how many criminal investigators Pam Bondi has under her control? Over 24,000.
Jeez.
Okay.
I had no idea it was that big.
Yep. It's huge. And to say, we can't, there's nothing to look at here, and they can't assign some of these people to it. Jamie Raskin yesterday said that he had first gotten access to the unredacted documents. They have to go in and they have to check into a computer. There are like 4 computers at the Justice Department that the members of Congress can look at. And then they're all given a separate sign-in so that they can look at what they're looking at. Okay. And then I'm sure Pam used that in her book of her slam book to say, oh, well, you were just interested in going after Donald Trump or whatever. And he said, I Googled, because there's a search function in these computers. And I Googled Donald Trump's name, and it came up over 1 million times. 1 million.
In the Epstein files.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when it comes to the redactions, it looks like they're having some AI computer go through and do the redactions, because the word don't, DON apostrophe T, was redacted out of one of the documents because they thought they were looking for Don T. Okay.
Well,
it's just such a cover up. The worse, the more they talk about it, and the way that she acted yesterday, all it's done is re-energize people to say, what the hell are you covering up, and who are you protecting? And it's embarrassing for me as an American to see that we're not doing anything, and yet around the world, people heads are rolling in other governments that have been implicated with Jeffrey Epstein. I think it's a death sentence for them.
One of the more powerful moments in that long hearing was when the Democrats had these big posters like we often, Gary, would have in court for the juries or for a judge, and it listed all the names of the victims that were there. I mean, the statute expressly said, don't redact the victims. They redacted all their buddies, all their fat cat billionaires, but the victims who were supposed to be protected were the ones that were not protected. And as the congressperson said, I forget which one it was, said to Bondi, we know you saw that because you redacted one name and you had the other's name. So you can't tell us you didn't see this document because you redacted one name from that document. So, and indicative of what happened when the victims were there, they do not give a damn about these victims. And that was shown to be very clear yesterday.
And they released thousands of photos, nude photos of these young girls when they were specifically under the law supposed to redact that.
And aren't the Republicans in Congress and the Senate just as reprehensible as Bondi herself, because they're covering for her? They aren't standing up for these victims any more than she is, or they would demand that she account for this atrocity. And there is one exception. Let's listen to Representative Congressman Thomas Massey as he explains what he wants in regard to the Epstein files, and ultimately is asked, what is your message to Pam Bondi?
I mean, what we're after is the men who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to. We want those names published. We're not out to embarrass people. And the problem is we went in there hoping to see that in 302 forms. What we found out is those 302 forms were redacted before they got to the DOJ. But our legislation directs the FBI, which is the agency that produced those 302 forms, to also produce these documents. The Attorney General is ultimately responsible for that production. So that's why we're here at the DOJ to view these files. But there needs to be more information given in those 302s. So I was disappointed we didn't find that. But it's also clear, just sort of as a checking their homework, that they need to do a little more homework. There are 6 men. We went in there for 2 hours. There's millions of files, right? And in a couple of hours, we found 6 men whose names have been redacted who are implicated in the way that the files are presented.
What's your message to Pam Bondi after what you saw today?
Need to do a little more work.
Yeah, Thomas Massey, in the next chapter of the Profiles of Courage with Liz Cheney, you need to put Thomas Massey's name as a Republican, the only Republican in that hearing room that had the integrity and courage to stand up to that garbage. It was garbage. I don't have any other word to put to it. I mean, she's a lawyer. You don't act that way. But beyond her behavior, the substance of it, let me be clear again. I've reminded listeners before, they have been looking at these files since last March to cover Donald Trump's ass, not for any good reason for the victims, but for them to whine about, oh, you only gave us 30 days, which they ignored that, by the way. That deadline was December 19th, and it's now mid-February. But they were looking, they had 24/7 people looking to cover Trump's ass as far back as March. So they had looked at those files. In addition, I'm surprised no one mentioned it, Bonnie. She failed the other requirement to provide a report to the court as to what efforts were made and why there were redactions. So she hasn't done her homework. It's not just about producing documents. She has not prepared the necessary report. Again, and this is what a judge would require in discovery, is, Gary, you know, if you hold back documents, you've got to do what's called a privilege log. You've got to give your reasons. You can't just redact things. And I'm not sure why nobody brought that up with her yesterday, because that was a specific obligation the statute required of her to produce that report.
One of them was trying to read the law. I think it was Massey was trying to read the law to her, and she kept interrupting. You know, it's a sad state of affairs. And Jim Jordan, my God, he shouldn't be chair of that committee, because he led the worst congressional hearing in U.S. history yesterday. And he did nothing to try to control her. He did nothing to try to force her to answer the questions. Instead, he just let her, use her slam book.
Yeah, and that if you go back and hear that audio, when he says your time is up, he says your time is up in a very demeaning, cynical fashion.
And how sad is it that when a Democrat or anybody asks a question and she starts to filibuster, the next words out of their mouth are, "I'm reclaiming my time." And he would always say, "Yes, you have your time back." That's all he was doing yesterday, was saying, "Okay, stop the clock. Yes, you still have your time to speak." It was ridiculous.
It was embarrassing.
It was shameful.
But that hearing will be different after the House is run by a Democratic majority, and there's a chairman who's not Jim Jordan, thank God. It's going to be a Democrat who's going to hold those witnesses responsible to answer the GD question. You're not there to give a speech. All she did was get up there and give speeches, answer the question. And again, Gary, as a lawyer, as judges, that's a big deal. Answer the damn question. Don't give a speech. That happens. My legal career, all the time, judges will get upset about that. Don't give me, you're not here to argue. Answer the damn question. What time of day is it? I don't want to hear your argument. That's not why you're here today.
Right.
But isn't that all the more reason that Trump will do everything in his power, and he has a lot of power, to rig the midterm election so he can retain control, the Republican Party can retain control of both houses of Congress? Because what would happen if a Democrat was in charge of that hearing or the next one a year from now with a majority of Democrats? Can they hold Bondi in contempt for refusing to answer questions? Can they put her in jail where she belongs?
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
They do have the power to hold her in contempt.
Ask Steve Bannon if he can go to jail for ignoring what the congressional committee wants him to do. But he, of course, he ignored the entire subpoena. But yes, she can be held in contempt and be put in jail.
So what will he not do in order to steal that election for the Republicans? He's going to seize those voting machines. He's going to say that's why he wants to nationalize the elections, right? In other words, I will count the votes. This is right out of the Joe Stalin playbook.
And Pam Bondi was involved in that charade down in Fulton County by sending the FBI in there because she controls the FBI.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I urge people. It'll blow your mind to Google that organizational chart for the Attorney General and see everything that she is responsible for, and then hold that up against what you saw yesterday and say, oh my God, this is what our country has done. We have put this person in charge of this huge apparatus that's the backbone, the spine of our country, the rule of law. And this is what we've got. I heard a podcast this week of talking about the Ukraine war. Remember that? We don't talk about that anymore. and somebody asked this guy who's been living over in Ukraine, and they are going through the worst time in this winter with no heat, and it's just an awful situation. But they asked, what do Ukrainians think about the Americans? And the fact that we've abandoned them. And he said that Americans make up things like they're real world problems, and we get bombed, and we're living real problems. And think about that in context of all of the crap that we talk about in our politics. They aren't real issues. They're all theater.
Yeah. You're listening to the Voice of Reason here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. We're going to take a brief time out for some important messages, and when we come back, we're going to shift a little bit to three senior officials in the Trump administration's in this administration today, whose names have turned up in the Epstein files, and find out what that's all about and why they're being covered. I'm Ed Golly. My co-hosts are attorney and former Circuit Court Judge Kevin Carey and attorney Gary Gibbons. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
Are you a writer, inventor? Do you have questions about your intellectual property rights? Well, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 o'clock for Joy on Paper. Once a month, I will have a special guest, the writer's legal eagle, Bill Larson of Larson & Larson, who can answer your questions. Protect your valuable work. Email me your questions to patsy.radio@gmail.com and then listen in every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. right here on Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network. That's patsy.radio@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tune in to the Shrink and Wrap Show here on Tan Talk Radio. Our stories and our topics will include, but are not limited to, everyday issues. We're here for you, for our listeners. We want to know what's important to you. So again, don't miss us on Tan Talk Radio. Tune in again, Shrink and Wrap Show. We'll see you then.
The Shrink and Wrap Show at its new time, Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. And now it's time for the Only a Conservative Could Think It Minute with your host, Ed Golly.
All emperors aim to leave their mark on history. And one facet of that is leaving their mark architecturally by building gleaming marble memorials of their reign. No president in American history has aspired to be Caesar as plainly as Crooked Donald has. Now, to be a proper Caesar, you need proper grandeur. The new Trump Kennedy Center is especially likely to have his fingerprints all over it in order to make it harder for his political enemies to remove all trace of him after he's gone. God only knows what self-aggrandizing stunts he has planned for the 250th anniversary of American independence this summer, but nothing would capture the perversion of our founding ideals as succinctly as turning the semi-centennial into a glorification ritual for a monarch. Think about that.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
If you'd like to reach out to us by email, our address is WTANvoice@AOL.com, AOLvoice@AOL.com. Ed Golly with Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey on the Voice of Reason. And it's time now for our rant of the week. We're going to hear from Liz Oyer. She was the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice. And she weighs in on her observations about Bill Asaley and the importance of public defenders.
I want to talk about some unsung heroes of the fight for our democracy, public defenders. All over the country, public defenders are quietly clobbering Donald Trump's lackeys in court. They're fighting to protect the rights of their neighbors, and they're winning. Across the country, Trump's DOJ has been arresting and prosecuting those who protest his policies. In Los Angeles, the guy leading these prosecutions is Bill Asaley, who the LA Times has called a bootlicking all-star. Asaley is not a serious lawyer, and a federal judge actually disqualified him from serving as U.S. Attorney for Los Angeles, but he's still clinging to power. Asaley spends a lot of time pumping himself up on Twitter. After the killing of Alex Preddy, he posted this: "If you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you." That is not true, and it got him in some trouble, but his mouth seems quicker than his brain. Another newspaper suggested Asaley should really spend less time posting nonsense on social media and more time doing the job he's been appointed to do. That's a quote. Since June, Asaley has brought charges against over 100 ICE protesters, claiming that they have assaulted or interfered with federal officers. But he just can't seem to win. At least 23 of his cases have been dismissed before trial, which is unheard of in federal court. And even more stunning is Asaley's record at trial. 6 of his cases have gone to trial, and he has lost every single one. To put that in perspective, more than 95% of all federal criminal prosecutions result in a conviction. And when those cases go to trial, prosecutors win more than 99% of the time. So to lose 6 out of 6 cases is a truly astonishing record of defeat. In every one of those cases, the lawyers on the other side were public defenders. People often write off public defenders, but that's a huge mistake. Federal public defenders are some of the best lawyers in the country, and here's why. They're not driven by money or fame or glory. They are driven by the sincere belief that every person deserves equal justice under law. You don't become a public defender because you can't find a better job. You become a public defender because you believe that defending the rights of others without fear or favor is the best job out there. I want to give a huge shout out to the federal public defenders in Los Angeles and elsewhere who are working tirelessly to protect their neighbors and defend our democracy. We owe them an enormous debt of gratitude for their work. I also want to note that Donald Trump doesn't like losers, so the clock may be ticking.
Again, well said. I mean, the what's the term? Scoreboard. It's incredible to, and I know Gary knows this as an attorney. Prosecutors, particularly federal prosecutors, don't have that record. They win almost all the time. And so that it just shows you this was nothing more than retribution. These are frivolous prosecutions, and there should be some accountability for that once the Democrats take control after November.
Yeah, she said that the federal public defenders are very prestigious jobs. And what used to be a prestigious job as well was a U.S. attorney. and an assistant U.S. attorney. They were coveted jobs. They were people made their careers doing those jobs, and now they can't hire enough people because they're quitting left and right because this brand of justice that Pam Bondi is insisting upon by all of the people under her is driving people away because there's, I'm not going to indict people that didn't commit a crime. I'm not going to try to trump up charges, pun intended, to actually, go after somebody criminally. And they don't even care about the conviction. It's all about the show. If we can get on the news cycle and embarrass somebody and harm their reputation, and we've owned that particular lib that particular day, people are tired of this. People in the country don't want this anymore. And Pam Bondi's days are going to be numbered in this job.
Well, as evidence of that, Gene Pirro, the Fox News judge who was awarded by becoming the U.S. attorney in New York, I believe for the Southern District, which was Giuliani's old job, which is perceived as probably the most important district in the country, was on the air the other day, pretty much begging for people to apply. We need you because there's been such a large number of attorneys leaving that office. What'd you say last week? The one attorney, Gary, said this job sucks.
Yeah.
Well, it does suck when you're told to lie to a judge and you're going to put your bar license at issue. It does suck. So don't take the job. So we'll see. But she was actually pleading on TV for people, call me. I don't know that she gave her private cell phone number out, but she wanted, call me. We have a bunch of job openings now at the Justice Department in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York.
It was an interview with Christy Greenberg, who was one of the second or third in command in the Southern District of New York, which is one of the most prestigious U.S. attorney's offices traditionally. She said, after watching Pam Bondi yesterday, said, there isn't a prosecutor that I have ever worked with that would not have turned around and talked to those women and taken down their personal information right there on the spot, because that's their job. They are supposed to, pursue justice. They're not supposed to cover things up. And she said, I was stunned that she didn't do that, or didn't have somebody, one of her aides, turn around and immediately do that, if for no other reason to not have it appear that she's heartless.
And it's not just the wrong people who they're prosecuting who haven't committed any crime and for which there's no evidence, but at that hearing, it leads to the people that they refuse to prosecute. When she was asked specifically about 3 senior officials in the Trump administration whose names had turned up in the Epstein files, she was asked if her department had questioned any of them about their potential involvement with Epstein.
The Justice Department specifically asked Secretary Lutnick about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
He has addressed those ties himself.
Has the DOJ asked Secretary Phelan about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know whether he has addressed those or not.
Has the Deputy Secretary Feinberg talked to the Department of Justice about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein? Yes or no? Has the Department of Justice talked to Deputy Secretary Feinberg about his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, which are clearly spelled out in the files? It's a very simple question. It's not a trick question. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, I'm stunned that you want to continue talking about.
Oh my gosh.
Epstein.
Okay. We have evidence that 3 senior officials within the Trump administration have ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And what I can
ties
conclude,
mean?
the American people have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration. This is not a game, Secretary.
I'm Attorney General.
My apologies, I couldn't tell.
The files showed embarrassing connections and conversations between Epstein and Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Peter Thiel, Steve Bannon, and Elon Musk, who asked to visit Epstein's island for the wildest party. Files had 38,000 references to Crooked Donald, Melania, and Mar-a-Lago. Powerful elites, the dump cast new shadows over figures such as Prince Andrew, Slick Willie, Bill Clinton, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. Newly hired CBS News contributor Peter Attia is under fire after numerous crude exchanges with Epstein about women. New York Giants co-owner Steve Tisch exchanged dozens of emails with Epstein, who offered to connect him to several women. Melania documentary director Brett Ratner is photographed hugging a young woman alongside Epstein. In one file, a former Epstein assistant said it was her boss who introduced model Melania Noss to Trump, a claim the Trumps hotly denied. Another file shared unverified FBI tips claiming that Trump hosted underage sex parties and engaged in violent sexual abuse of minors. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche insisted that nothing in the files merited further investigation, saying it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
Let's talk about Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
Oh, yes.
Who committed perjury, by the way, before a congressional subcommittee. He told, there was a subcommittee hearing of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He described his sole contact with Epstein, who he was neighbors with, by the way. They were neighbors, as a handful of emails and a pair of meetings that were years apart. I did not, this is quoting our friend Lutnick, I did not have any relationship with him. I barely had anything to do with him. Now it's come out, he's admitted he was on the Epstein Island with him.
He was in business with him. They invested in a company together all the way until 2018.
Now, I assume, Gary, that he was under oath when he testified before the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee. And so he's committed perjury because he's now admitted that he was on the island. Now he says, I was with my wife and my kids and my nannies and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't change the fact he committed perjury.
Boy, they asked him under oath in a Senate hearing this week about all of these things and caught him in some lies, and then asked him if he would be willing to supplement their files and deliver any emails and other records that he personally has. And boy, you should have seen him tap dance. He was, eyes were blinking, head was shaking, all of the signs that somebody's lying. It was shameful. Well, this guy is just a billionaire buddy that, we have to protect all of our billionaires.
It was Republican Congressman Thomas Massey calling for Lutnick to resign. The Voice of Reason's calling for Lutnick to proceed to the nearest federal penitentiary and check himself in for life. Listen.
Did you, in fact, make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies, and we had lunch on the island.
That was President Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick admitting under oath that he visited Jeffrey Epstein's private island with his family in 2012. Now, this is a sharp reversal for Lutnick. He was Epstein's neighbor in New York, and in a recent interview, Lutnick said that Epstein gave him a tour of his home in 2005 and that he never met with him again.
My wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. Really? So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
Newly released Epstein files show that Lutnick sought to meet or call Epstein several times after 2005, including after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, who led the push for the release of the files, is now calling for Lutnick to resign.
Really, he should make life easier on the president, frankly, and just resign.
Meanwhile, the White House says that the president is standing firmly by Lutnick.
Secretary Lutnick remains a very important member of President Trump's team, and the president fully supports the secretary.
Well, they didn't mention the fact that he committed perjury. The only reason he came out and told the truth was because of the documentation that came out this past week. He testified under oath before a House Appropriations House subcommittee that he did not have that contact. That's perjury. I don't know when that stops mattering to people. He was under oath when he testified before that House subcommittee on appropriations. So again, he only told the truth now because he was busted. And he's kind of like, I'm not a crook, like Nixon said. He says anyone who's suggesting I did anything wrong. I was with my wife and 10 kids and nannies on just having lunch and left. It all changed once he was busted with the documents, which he should have known was going to come out. He knew what the truth was.
Most of us really never heard of Howard Lutnick before he joined the Trump clone car. He held a long tenure as the CEO of the financial services behemoth Cantor Fitzgerald, where, according to Forbes magazine, he became known as the most hated man on Wall Street. Forbes reported that his multi-billion-dollar empire is a tangle of self-dealing with record-keeping issues that date back decades and infighting that continues to the present day. According to a former employee, quote, "The whole firm is about screwing people. It's about squeezing people," unquote.
Well, the DOJ should indict him for perjury. I mean, why is he not being indicted?
Mm-hmm.
That's a federal crime. People have gone to prison for that.
She only has 24,000 investigators. Come on. She doesn't have time for that.
Gary made an important point earlier before the break that I want to emphasize about grand juries. And we talked about the fact that, and Liz Oyer talked about this 0 for 6 and dismissals and grand juries rejecting this. These are not lawyers, as we talked about. And what's happening now, the people that read the newspaper and watch the news and the internet, it's changing grand juries. They're not going to, there's going to be no presumption in favor of the Department of Justice.
Yeah, we're seeing just the opposite, that
correct.
they're looking at them and saying, I can't believe anything you're saying, even without a defense attorney, even without anybody telling the other side of the story. They're just, these cases are so corrupt and they're all politically motivated, and everybody is now realizing that, and it's shameful.
And you know what really is remarkable is that the Democrats are always portrayed as the party that's going to steal the elections, and they're so corrupt. Do you remember Al Franken? He was a senator from Minnesota. Now,
yes.
he was a comic, and he was in the USO tour, flying home on a military plane where the seating isn't set up like a conventional plane. It's along the side of the plane. So it's like a big row of seats. You remember the photo of him appearing like he was getting ready to grope one of the members in the cast. And that was actually a part of a bit that they did in the USO act. He was just mimicking that. He never touched her. He didn't pull her blouse up while she was asleep. He didn't do anything except resign. Now look at what these guys have done. Look at their association with this Epstein, and none of them will even take any responsibility for what they've done. They're all trying to distance themselves. They haven't got any integrity, and neither does Bondi.
Well, that's true. In fact, I was waiting for someone on that committee to say what was said to McCarthy was, "Have you no decency?" Yeah. And one thing we haven't mentioned yet, which happened, you could see from her little, what they call the book, a little notebook of jabs to take, personal jabs to take. They had
slam book.
Yeah, they had a name for it. But and I forget who was the congresswoman who they were talking about, and
John Paul.
Yes, you could see that in the book, because you could see it on either the video or the camera, that what search requests she had made while she was reviewing the Epstein documents on Monday. So they were invading her privacy even then. That's a major problem. You don't do that. You don't go in there. You'd mentioned, Gary, about they were seeing, that you had to go to the computer, and you had, by the way, 1 hour. They gave Massey 2 hours because he was one of the two authors of the bill, but they used it as a way to gain information illegally from these Congress people.
Yeah, that when they finally allowed Congress to go and go to these computer terminals at the DOJ, the first day that they made them available for that was a Sunday, and Jamie Raskin said, "We'll be there," and he and Massey and Khanna went, day one. But this stuff has been subpoenaed from Congress to the DOJ since last July. Everything that was in the Epstein Transparency Act, what an oxymoron that is. Everything that was in there, they had already asked for in a valid subpoena issued by the House of Representatives that should be honored and they've still stonewalled them. And I mentioned earlier there's a lot of these victims who have for years said, just give me my file. And they won't even get back to them for more than 2 years.
Well, a couple things need to happen. The victims need to, I know we talked about this a few weeks ago. They're a little concerned about naming names, but being sued for defamation, which has happened before and all. So they can do that anonymously. And I would, if I were Massey, who's the Democrat who's with him again?
Ro Khanna.
Khanna and Massey, because the judge would not, in the Maxwell case, would not pursue it, but said there are other remedies. They should be filing a civil suit, yesterday for violations of that statute.
Well, it's more than just a defamation suit. We mentioned earlier the person that reported something and got their head blown off. So, there are lots of problems with that's why they want the Justice Department to release this information and then do what they're supposed to do and go after the bad people and stop protecting them.
The fact we're talking still about it, and one of the commentators, maybe been on Morning Joe this morning, was saying all this is doing is keeping this as a hot issue. And that's the thing we've been talking about for many, many weeks. To me, they're making a mistake by it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. This issue is not going away.
And let's turn to Ghislaine Maxwell in the couple minutes we have left. Do you think that she could potentially get a pardon? Obviously, that's what she's bucking for. And would that be detrimental to the orange pedophile if he did it? And if he doesn't, is she going to sing?
Yeah, because if she's pardoned and if Congress immunizes her from any future, prosecution for the things that she testifies to, she no longer has the ability to claim the Fifth Amendment privilege.
She's
and then, it could really hit the fan.
Because if she doesn't answer the questions to their satisfaction, they can withdraw the immunity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's got to play ball. Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, clemency is the general concept, and you have pardoning and commutation. Pardon is a full Monty, which we've said on the show many times. Trump has gone well beyond what any other president does in terms of pardoning. Commutation is just the sentence goes away, you get out of prison, but you're still a convicted felon. But you got to pay the piper. There's, my father would always tell me, there's no free lunch. It's put Trump in a little bit of a pickle here. So, and I love seeing that man squirm, because he deserves it fully to squirm, as do those Congress people who have no character, no guts.
You remember when you play Monopoly as a kid, and there was the card, the get out of jail free card, and the guy flying with the top hat that had wings, and you get out of jail free. He's in the Epstein file too.
Yeah. Well, those cards come with a price. Trump's made a fortune selling pardons, and probably has no intention of standing down on that process.
Well, keep in mind, they told these Congress people they did not have unlimited time to look at those computers. They were given a very short period of time. I don't know why that was the case. They should have been a time limit on that. This wasn't a bar exam.
No.
Made no sense.
No, you're supposed to turn over every file. They've only turned over half of them. So what's in the other half, folks?
But to
start asking that question.
But to tell Congress you only have an hour or two to look at the unredacted documents, that's absurd. They should be screaming from the hilltops about that problem.
Yeah, exactly. So, is this going to make Watergate look like nothing more than a gumball machine being knocked over in history?
I think it's such a stark contrast, because in Watergate you actually had members of both parties who were trying to get to the bottom of what happened.
And
that's exactly
heads
right.
rolled and people went to jail.
Yes. And that's
and
what some of these people need to remember.
He resigned because Republicans went to him, not Democrats. Republicans went to him.
For a lot less egregious conduct.
Well, stay with us on the Tan Talk Radio Network. We'll break for news and then be back with the second half of the program, where we'll open the phone lines if you care to weigh in on it. And we'll find out what a lucrative year it's been for Trump and his family. And also, do taxpayers owe Crooked Donald $10 billion? Well, we'll find out why he thinks so. You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network, back with more of the issues that conservatives never want you to hear about.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez. The immigration crackdown in Minnesota is ending. The president's border czar, Tom Homan, made the announcement last hour.
There are some issues here. We fixed those issues. We've had great success with this operation, and we're leaving Minnesota safer.
The crackdown led to mass detentions and protests. Two demonstrators, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, were shot to death by ICE agents. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz says the operation, which started in December, should end in days. What could be a key break as the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie enters its 12th day. Correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is in Tucson.
FBI agents are fanning out across her neighborhood north of Tucson, searching the foothills through brush and along roads. On Wednesday, a source close to the investigation confirms to CBS News the discovery of a pair of gloves during a search, reportedly about 1.5 miles from Guthrie's home. Investigators will now test the gloves for DNA.
The find comes just days after the release of doorbell camera footage from Guthrie's home the night she was abducted. A Ukrainian skeleton racer was given one last chance today to remove his helmet at the Winter Olympics in Italy. He refused and was promptly disqualified from the games. The helmet honors Ukrainian athletes and coaches killed in the war with Russia.
I disagree with this decision because I truly believe that we didn't violate any rules. Rule 50, political propaganda, discriminational propaganda, or racial propaganda is definitely not about this helmet.
NATO's Secretary President Trump for his efforts to end the war.
The U.S. is leading the peace effort, and there is only one country, the most powerful nation on earth, the U.S., which can do that under the leadership of President Trump, breaking the deadlock with Putin, getting the peace process going. So I really think the U.S. is doing exactly what we need when it comes to Ukraine.
Secretary Pete Hegseth skipped the meeting of defense ministers at NATO headquarters in Brussels. A man who went on a rampage chopping down trees in L.A. last year has pleaded no contest.
Samuel Groft entered his plea just as his vandalism trial was about to begin. He was sentenced to 2 years in county jail and will have to pay restitution. He caused an estimated $350,000 in damages. Over 7 days last April, Groff cut down 12 trees with a chainsaw. Anna Tabuena-Ruddy manages LA's Bureau of Street Services.
It's eco-terrorism, in my opinion, this many trees.
It's still not clear why Groff attacked the trees. He told police he loves trees. He has a history of mental health issues. Michael Wallace, CBS News.
The Dow is up 191 points in early trading. This is CBS News. Take control of your financial life. Follow and listen to Money Watch with Jill Schlesinger on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Downtown Dave. How would you like to be able to promote yourself, your business, or someone else's business for less than the cost of one 60-second commercial on many Tampa Bay radio stations? Here's the deal. You can have your own 1-hour radio program on the Tan Talk Network for less than the cost of one 60-second announcement on many Tampa Bay stations. Your program will be on 2 Tampa Bay radio stations and will cover 4 million people in Florida, plus worldwide on the internet in both audio and video. And you'll have a web link for your business on the Tan Talk 1340 website. We provide the producer, the state-of-the-art equipment, free production of commercials, and much more. Check it out today. Call Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at 727-510-7622. That's 510-7622. Call Lola O'Brien now, 727-510-7622. Call now and your 1-hour radio program can start tomorrow. Call 510-7622 for Lola O'Brien, the Irish Hawaiian, at the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Join the party, Florida. America's turning 250, and the biggest celebration is at the Florida State Fair, February 5th through the 16th. Whether it's your first time or your first time in a long time, we have affordable fun and surprises for everyone. Save big by planning ahead. See the deals and buy now at floridastatefair.com or participating Walgreens. Big birthday, big deals. Join America's sunniest celebration at the Florida State Fair, February 5th through the 16th. Visit floridastatefair.com today.
Do you have questions after being injured in a car accident or injured because of someone's negligence? Do you feel overwhelmed or uncertain about the next steps after being injured in a crash? The personal injury attorneys at Peronick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes have been helping their injured clients since 1955 and are now on this radio station to provide guidance to you. Listen to FLA Law each Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Let their decades of experience help you and your family. Offices in Clearwater, non-attorney spokesman.
Hi, I'm Dawn Reese with the Dawn Reese Show, most powerful names in entertainment, every Thursday at 5 p.m. I have so many different segments I'm so excited to share with you, from miracle stories to celebrity interviews with Hollywood connections to travel to local business, promoting your business on the air with me, an amazing opportunity to grow your business. Tune in to the Tan Talk Radio Network, 106.1 FM on Thursdays, 5 p.m. with me, Dawn Reese.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
Now, the voice of reason continues here on the Tan Talk Radio Network. Here again is your host for today's program, Ed Golly.
And my co-hosts are both attorneys. First, Kevin Carey, also a former circuit court judge, and our voice of reason's senior political analyst, Gary Gibbons. Thank you both for being in today.
Our pleasure.
Been a very lucrative year for the Trump crime family, and I'll give you some examples. In just the past 6 months or so, a Bitcoin mining company headed by Eric Trump brought the family more than $100 million.
How about the fact that promotions by a major crypto exchange whose founder was recently pardoned by President Trump, they've positioned the family to pull in about $136 million.
A convoluted deal that turned a company into a stockpile of Trump-linked digital tokens appears to have brought the family another $562 million.
And crypto is hardly the only family business. The Trumps sold the use of their name to a Saudi real estate company that is close to the royal family for a new resort in the Maldives and 2 other new mega projects inside the Saudi kingdom.
Donald Trump Jr. made millions by reinventing himself as an advisor or director to 6 companies.
And the orange pedophile himself, whose administration regulates the banking and securities industries, filed a lawsuit against J.P. Morgan Chase demanding $5 billion, not as a deposit in the U.S. Treasury, but as a check made out to Donald J. Trump.
Now, the problem, real quick, with when CBS caved and these other companies have caved is it just encouraged more lawsuits and set a precedent for the lawsuit. So these are frivolous lawsuits. But Trump is very emboldened by what happened with CBS, et cetera, to push these cases and say they'll settle. They don't really care about the merits of the case.
That's
so
right.
The total of all that at the end of 1 year was what? $4 billion.
Yeah.
And yet everybody was so upset about Hunter Biden, who didn't work for the administration. Yes, he cashed in on his father's name to the tune of about $15 million that he probably didn't deserve. But a private company paid him that. And yet here we are, letting the emoluments clause be used as toilet paper in this administration.
Nelson Rockefeller's, one of his famous lines was $1 million here, $1 million there. Then you start talking about some real money. I would say with Trump and his children and buddies, it's $1 billion here and $1 billion there. And we're talking about some real money.
And then remember that the GOP demanded that Hunter Biden be prosecuted for that and the false box that he checked on the gun application or something like that is done routinely when people buy guns.
There's never been that prosecution, never.
Never. And he ended up being prosecuted. Well, his father didn't fire anybody that would dare bring a charge against him or get rid of the attorney general. He let that prosecution go through and Hunter was convicted. True, he was pardoned. Oh my goodness. All the pearl clutching that went on over that, right? Because
they're still talking about Hunter Biden. They're still talking about him.
Yeah. And he's never been in office. But when we look, all of these things we've mentioned blatantly and absolutely violate the emoluments clause of the Constitution, because it's a clear conflict of interest with respect to the president's duties and his responsibilities to the country that can be compromised when he takes money from foreign companies to enrich himself.
Once again, I would make a point we've made many times on this show, which is that we all know, Trump has no character, no ethics. He'll do whatever he can. He's like an animal. But the people that stood around him and did nothing, just like what happened in Germany, they're the ones that need to be held accountable.
Now, the same thing's going on with Ron DeSantis here in Florida. I mean, he's catching on. You remember he paid $81 million for a sandbar that had no possible connection to the Florida Wildlife Corridor, even though that was the specified use of that money. That's what the only thing it was supposed to be used for. And he did it because, of course, he was paying off a donor who had also been convicted of a crime, and paid him something like 10 times the amount that the guy had paid for that property. So he's rewarding a donor.
There really needs to be a bipartisan effort to stop this. You should not be getting rich. Whether you're a judge or a congressperson, they pay you a good living and you get a nice pension. You should not be getting rich. And I would say that of Democrats and Republicans. I think it's a bipartisan issue. But you should not be leaving office enriched from that office.
And we have to stop what's going on in our politics today, which is the whataboutisms. Every time you talk about something that's wrong, what the other camp, the other team says is, well, what about Bill Clinton? Or what about, and instead of saying, you know what, they were all wrong. Okay. Everything that Bill Clinton did with Monica Lewinsky was wrong. Okay.
But it wasn't a violation of the Constitution. And that's why the impeachment failed.
But we have to start getting back to some moral clarity in this country. And it's completely going out the window with all of the stuff that's happening today. And this whataboutism stuff is all you see on social media. And whenever somebody tries to make a point about something that's, should be right or wrong, it's, well, what about your guy who did that stuff?
Well,
it's wrong.
Menendez did go to the joint. He and his wife for accepting some kind of gratuity from Saudi Arabia, I think it was, right? So he didn't skate. Nobody cut him a pardon, and he's still sitting in the joint.
Yeah, there are two problems with that, and I agree with you, Gary. One is this false equivalency. One, that you're raising it, and two, that you're trying to make it equivalent, which it often is not. It's as basic as what happened yesterday with Bondi for the hearing. Answer the damn question. Don't give me a speech. There are procedures, and Gary knows this, Ed. As lawyers, procedure is as important as anything. I'm not sure non-lawyers or non-judges perceive this, but there are rules of procedure that must be followed. And I'm sure there are rules of procedure with Congress, too, at those hearings, just like court hearings. And they're not being followed, and so what you have is chaos. So you need to go back to basics. When you get a question, don't give me a speech. Answer the question. Next question. Move on. You may not like the fact that the Democrat is criticizing you, and I don't think the Congress people should be giving speeches as well, because what's happened when Bondi and others have done this is everyone is going down to this food fight, and that's what happened yesterday.
They asked Mike Johnson when that decision came out that the grand jury decided not to indict the two senators and 4 members of the House for saying, you should not follow an illegal order if you're a member of the military, which is black letter law. They asked him, do you think that they should have been indicted? And at first he said, well, I don't know. I need to look into, I haven't heard about any of that. That's his standard answer. But then he said, well, maybe they should. And if you're the leader of the House of Representatives, you think it's okay for your members to be arrested and criminally charged for saying things that they're supposed to speak out against as part of their job in Congress? There's the speech and debate clause in Congress that gives people a lot of that are elected to that office wide latitude in the things that they can and cannot say. And he's just thrown that under the bus again, looking over his shoulder to make sure that he doesn't offend Donald Trump, because he is the one that ordered those people to be prosecuted. It's just so sad.
Well, Mike Johnson will go down as a very weak and cowardly short-term speaker. He will lose that job when the Democrats take over the House next year, or this year. When the elections this year, they would take over in January. So he's going to become irrelevant. I think at some point he should do it maybe like what Tillis is doing in North Carolina. Maybe because you're going to be losing that position, maybe do something that you think is right and have some integrity. You might feel better about yourself, beyond your children and grandchildren. I mean, someone beyond just, a MAGA person who's the grandchild of Mike Johnson in 30 years may go, why did he do that? That really wasn't, that was a coward.
He didn't stand up for the institution,
Correct.
And there's so many people that are not standing up for the institutions that have made this country what it is. And
sacrifice. You don't see nothing about sacrifice in this administration. Nothing. Have you ever heard Trump once mention the word sacrifice?
I've heard him mention suckers and losers, but you still have this unwavering confidence that we're going to have a free and fair election. What do you think is going on with the raid in Fulton County? What's going to become of that? He didn't do that just to get some camera time for his ICE people. He did that and he came right out and said that people are going to be prosecuted. So he is going to take those ballots. He's going to assert that there was fraud in that election. He's going to prosecute people, whoever they are going to be, probably Republicans, because they ran the election in Georgia, and show that, according to him, there was corruption in the election system. And then he's going to use that as the framework to assert that all democratically run elections in blue states are corrupt, and he's going to need to send his ICE Gestapo in to seize those voting machines so he can count the votes, and guess who's going to win? And then what's going to happen?
Well, I can't.
What is going to happen?
I can't speak for Gary. I don't have an unwavering confidence. What I've said over the last few months is that you've got over 60 lawsuits in the various states. Elections are going to be run by the states, not contrary to what Trump wants to do. Well, let me finish. Let me finish. The point is, I fully agree that Trump will do anything to cheat. The guy cheats in golf. He cheats on his wife. He cheats on anything.
Taxes.
But what I'm saying is the protection from that is the litigation state by state. Now, when you guys talk about, and I fully agree, when you've got ICE agents at every election center, that's certainly frightening, that thought.
But my point is, if he goes ahead and snags those machines and says, here are the results, the Republicans win, we still have a majority, everybody loves me and my policies, and this makes it clear, and the Democrats are trying to cheat, what recourse does America have if he steals this election?
When you say if he snags those machines, that's a big if. So we'll see.
Well, what he's doing with this, first of all, the statute of limitations has run on any criminal charges coming out of the 2020 election. Okay. But what he's doing is he's just trying to advance this myth that our elections are fraudulent. And in particular, but not everywhere, not the places that I won, but in the places where I didn't win, there must be some fraud going on, as if, we aren't a completely divided country in terms of, how we vote.
Well, Bad Bunny did that to us. But anyway, why is he doing this? Why is he asserting that the blue states are always fraudulent?
Yeah, he wants to. I agree with you. I think they're going to send in ICE agents, which have no jurisdiction to be anywhere near a polling place, but only his personal army. Their job is to try to get people who are in the interior of the country here illegally to deport them. Okay? Yeah,
and we've also emphasized the other way that they're going to is basically voter suppression, is to try and intimidate people not to even show up. I think once they show up, you're right, there's going to be some intimidation there, but even suggesting, and that's why they're trying to get all this information from these voter registration logs and whatnot, so they want to make you afraid to even vote. Maybe you'll get arrested if you're not a citizen, or maybe you've got some criminal charge. It doesn't take much. What Trump just does, he tries to frighten you. That's what bullies do. They're not so much, and you said this earlier, Ed, and I agree with you. If they lose a case or two, that doesn't matter to them, but they have made a point, and out of fear, they've prevented that conduct from other people.
Yeah, and the ballots in Georgia were counted 3 or 4 times by hand count and then also by machine counts, and they were upheld and certified by Republican leaders of that state as being fair and accurate.
And Trump committed a felony in interfering. He was indicted for interfering with that process.
And what Trump has done by seizing those records is that he's destroyed the chain of custody of those ballots. So from the time that those ballots were cast until the time that the FBI seized them, the Georgia election officials knew exactly what those ballots were, how many there were, how they were cast. And now that nobody knows that because we don't know where they are. There's 700 boxes of them. And if they pull some out or if they change the numbers or try to insert some other kind of ballot in there, we don't know that. So, that's what he's doing. He's just trying to stir the pot and say that there's something that's wrong, something smells, you can't trust these results. And then it does lay the table for him to come in and say, you know what, this wasn't a fair election. I'm not going to allow Mike Johnson, who is the Speaker of the House, to certify that election.
Well, keep in mind, these Republicans were all historically big on states' rights. They'd say all power not granted to the federal government is expressly left for the states. There was a state remedy in Georgia if there was a problem with that 2020 election. That time has long since passed, and there was no basis for that. So he comes in and Trump comes in and says, let's bring the federal government into a state system. That's incredible. Again, I think people might see this stuff and think, oh, this is normal behavior. It's not. It's not normal behavior to have the federal government come in and take over the state election process.
And to have the director of national intelligence there at the request of Pam Bondi. Again, they're both trying to curry favor with their boss and improve their standing with him because both of them have been criticized by Trump for not being, strong enough and in your face enough. And so that was Pam yesterday, and Tulsi was down there in Atlanta doing that. She has no jurisdiction over anything like that other than to raise questions and suspicion that, there must be some international involvement with our elections, which makes them unreliable.
Which you can always say that.
Sow seeds of doubt as much as possible so that he can try to convince people that, I need to be in charge.
There will one day be an autopsy of the most corrupt administration by far in this country's history of 250 years. And that autopsy will take a long time.
Well, it's 23 minutes past the hour, listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network at Golly with Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey. In about 15 minutes, we'll open the phone lines if you care to call in and address anything that we've been talking about on the program. The number is 727-441-3000. 441-3000.
Hey, just a quick comment real quick about someone, just very quickly. Dan Goldman, who was on that committee yesterday, he was a lawyer from New York. I really think he's a up and comer. I would suggest to our listeners to maybe Google him, and he's someone to watch in the next few years. Just an aside.
I wanted to circle back to a couple other things about DeSantis. You remember his private army that he established spent $4 million that was completely unnecessary just to use up all of their funding for the year, buying aircraft parts that weren't needed instead of putting it back into the Treasury.
You think you can buy them on eBay?
And what does DeSantis do now? He wants to double their budget so they can waste 10 times as much money. And remember the Hope Florida scandal, $10 million misappropriated there. There's no outrage from Republicans in this state or in the federal government where there should be. And so instead of demanding accountability, the GOP just sweeps all this stuff under the rug. It's why it's time for them to change their mascot from an elephant to an ostrich. They all got their head in the sand. Crooked Donald promised at the start of his first term that neither he nor his family would ever do anything that might even be perceived to be exploitive of the office of the presidency. But all the deals that the Trump crime family is engaged in do exactly precisely that. A few of the Trump family's recent deals, like those with the Saudis or the crypto exchange, even create the appearance of a potential payoff. When asked, and that just says nothing about all the pardons that he's selling. You know, he must have gotten a fortune for the Hernandez pardon. The guy imported 400 tons of cocaine in this country, and Trump wants you to believe he cares about drug overdoses. Are you joking me? When asked recently why he had abandoned his former restraint, the orange pedophile told the New York Times that he had discovered, quote, nobody cared, unquote. Well, that's certainly true and applies to the Republicans. They have no integrity. But is the public really that nonchalant? Because a year in all this presidential money making and total blatant disregard for the emoluments clause continues. Ask yourself, how's he increased his net worth $4 billion on a $400,000 a year salary? Nancy Pelosi, okay, yeah, she's stock trading on inside information, but it's not illegal. And that's something that Anna Luna wants to change. But isn't it interesting that she doesn't want that to apply to the president, only members of Congress? I wonder why that is. You think she's looking for an endorsement? I
mean, what Gary mentioned is as silly as when you get pulled over for a speeding ticket and you tell the police officer that they're all speeding. It's just as absurd. By the way, regarding DeSantis, there was in the paper today, this emergency fund is looking to what would expire Monday, which is to respond to emergencies, including the immigration enforcement actions. And the state Senate president, we talked about this last week, is still kissing his tail. But Dan Perez in the House actually has some backbone, as had Andrade, who's been very instrumental in the Hope Florida issue, as well as the legislation to prevent that from happening in the future. So the House is pushing back a little bit on this too, because what they do, they use this quote emergency money for purposes that are not emergencies.
Yeah. And just quickly, speaking of elections, Susan Collins has announced she's going to run for another term in Maine. Isn't she an independent, or is she?
No, she's a Republican. When she ran initially, I've seen one of her early debates when she ran. She said, "I will not serve more than 2 terms as a senator." This would be number 4, I think. So.
But what about Biden? He said he was going to be a one-term. Actually, he was a one-term president, just like he said he was going to be. The problem is he just waited too long to announce it.
Susan Collins is an interesting focus. She generally outperforms predictions because she's not a very, exciting candidate. But what she's done, the problem what she's got now, she's pissed off everybody with various issues, and she's not like Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, who has still stood up. She is not. It used to be Murkowski and Collins were the 2 Republicans who, would stand up. She's not that way anymore. And there's talk, by the way, speaking of politics, if we get a 50-50, which would go then, to the Republicans would have the tie-breaking vote with the vice president, of going to Murkowski. And the first time I heard this was this week, going to Murkowski and saying, come to us. The water's warmer here than where you are now. So there may be a push if it goes to 50-50. So arguably you may not need 4 seats. You may just need 3. That's the point.
But what she's likely to have thrown in her face is the fact that she voted to put rapist Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, which then led to the oppression of women over half the country with respect to their reproductive freedom. And in fact, I just saw a few days ago that a lot of women are leaving the state of Florida to terminate an unwanted pregnancy now. It hasn't cut down on the number. It's just that they've got to go through the inconvenience to go into another state to get it done.
Yeah, my support of Collins or respect ended that Friday afternoon when she made it very dramatic. She came out on a Friday afternoon with her decision on Kavanaugh. And what she said, which I'll never forget as I was driving, is, I do think the professor, I forget the professor's name from California, but she was I thought, very credible when she testified before the Congress. She thinks that she was assaulted sexually, but I think she was confused that it was Kavanaugh, which to me is one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. This is a woman, your point, Ed, about women being offended by this, a woman who's being sexually assaulted. This wasn't in a back alley. This was in someone's room in college.
Frat house, wasn't it?
Right. Yes, it was a fraternity room. Having lived in a fraternity for 3 years, I kind of know those settings, and I'm not suggesting sexual assault occurred, but I'm saying you know the persons you're with. This is not some stranger. So to suggest that she was confused, to me, she lost all credibility.
Well, let's take our break now, and after which we'll invite you to call in if you'd like to comment on anything we're yakking about. This is Voice of Reason, the Tan Talk Radio Network. When we come back, do the taxpayers, that would be you, owe Trump $10 billion? That and more of the issues that the conservatives never want you to hear about.
Caregivers find the support they need on Connecting Caregivers Radio with Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver. Heard every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m., Linda and her caring and knowledgeable guests will bring you education, information, and resources, as well as a shoulder for caregivers. That's Connecting Caregivers Radio with Linda Burhans, the gal who cares for the caregiver, where you can find help and hope every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
You're listening to the Voice of Reason on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
The following is a customer review of Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater.
Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater has been in business for over 100 years. That means they've had over a century to refine the art of scamming their customers. And boy, have they mastered the craft. When I went to Dimmitt to buy a used EV, the first con they ran on me was to tell me I had 3 days to back out of any deal I made. Turned out to be a total lie. Second con was to push me into financing the car when I wanted to pay cash. That way they could sell the loan and make more money on me. Because they didn't see me as a customer to whom they would sell a car at a fair price and treat honestly. They saw me as a mark they could grift to the fullest. They even stole my $4,000 federal tax rebate. It's amazing they didn't find a way to steal the car back from me after they sold it to me. Dimmitt screwed me every way, including up and down, because I had mistakenly assumed Dimmitt Chevrolet Clearwater was a reputable business. So remember, if you shop Dimmitt, you'll say, damn it.
Don't turn it off now. You need this stuff. Tampa Bay's Tan Talk Radio Network.
All right. Time for Poll Watch, where we find from a Yale University, George Mason University poll that 72% of Americans believe, I would say understand, that climate change is happening, while 13% don't buy into it. 68% believe global warming will harm future generations, and 44% think that people in the United States are already being harmed by it. Also, with respect to ICE, just over half, 55% of Americans now say they have very little confidence in immigration and customs enforcement. Trust in ICE among independent voters dwindled from, get this, 51% in December, now in January, 33%, and probably continuing to drop. I don't know, maybe that's one reason that Homan pulled back a little bit, because they realized those independents are really the block of voters that are going to determine the election outcomes. And if he's losing those voters, he's going to really need to cheat a lot to get Republicans in power.
The two issues that Trump, I think, won on was immigration and the economy, and he's underwater on both those issues right now.
And we'll hear in a few minutes what actually happens after immigration agents shoot someone. But for now, let's talk about the climate, Gary. Climate issue.
You know, it's a sad day for people in the United States, because, you know, back in the Obama administration, they actually decided that maybe we ought to do some research into the effects that all this pollution is having on human health. Mm-hmm. And they did factual studies, and they promulgated rules. And when you do that in an administrative agency like the EPA, you invite comment from people, you get expert testimony, and you create standards for certain things that are primarily designed to protect the health of people. For example, I bet many people don't know that Hillsborough County has the worst ozone of any county in the country.
Which
Okay?
I would not expect, since it's a coastal city and there's no mountains to block it and hold it. But I was going to say, I remember seeing it when I would go up in a private airplane. It's just like at a certain altitude, maybe 6,000 feet. It's like this brown air suddenly becomes recognizable because the air above it is clear. It was unbelievable how dirty that air could be seen once the clean air above it was comparable to it. It's unbelievable.
And there's scientific evidence of the adverse health effects for people with asthma.
Yeah.
And any other kind of COPD, any of those things are exacerbated by this air pollution. And so the Trump administration, in its wisdom, said, well, we're just going to get rid of the rule that says that this was an endangerment to public health. Forget about all the studies that we did a few years ago, and I'm sure it's all fixed now, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we're going back to burning more fossil fuels and going back to coal. But that endangerment finding it underpins all of the climate regulations that we've created to try to protect health, and they've just wiped them away, calling them a hoax. And so if you have trouble breathing going forward, it's just a hoax.
It's why he's doing such a reprehensible job as president. One reason, he seems to think that he can resolve any problem with a single sentence that is completely false, just like with Social Security, for example. The trust fund is now anticipated to run out in the year 2023. He says, I've solved the problem. We got rid of all the waste and fraud in Social Security. We don't need to do anything about it. That isn't going to do anything. Something's going to need to be done to address it.
And again, I put this on not just
That doesn't
Trump.
solve it.
EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, another toady. He is. I mean, you can't.
Go ahead.
I mean, for all us to say the elephant's pink, not purple, but and then Caroline Levitt, who the strongest White House correspondent. I mean, she lies every time she opens her mouth. She said this action will be the largest deregulatory action in American history and will save the American people $1.3 trillion in crushing regulations.
But cost about $4.5 trillion in dealing with all the fires that'll be caused, the floods, the hurricanes,
and as
droughts.
Gary noted,
Dr.
the
Bills.
health. I mean, as much as these Republicans love to whine about regulations, a lot of these regulations are done for safety and health of the public.
They're done because people and businesses in particular will not do it themselves unless they're forced to, because
that's true.
Their first instinct is to do whatever they can get away with that won't violate the law. So you have to pass regulations, and what these are doing, really, it's not saving the American people $1.3 trillion. It's saving corporations the money that they would have to spend in order to protect your health.
Because when mileage standards are lowered, you pay more for each mile you drive because you need to put more fuel in the car, right?
Vince Lombardi.
It's just transferring the wealth from the middle class to the uber rich.
They asked Vince Lombardi what is the secret to success in coaching, and what he said was making grown men do what they don't want to do. And I would say, toward your point, Gary, that's the same thing. Right? We won't do these things. But what's happened, and we've said this before, Trump learned that his cabinet, which wasn't a very strong cabinet, and Trump won, but because they would push back, he learned, and he said, I'm not going to have anyone in there now but a bunch of people that'll be yes men and yes women to me, which is a huge detriment to this country, because none of these cabinet people push back with him at all, and they just do exactly what he wants to do. And that system doesn't work well without there being a pushback from the cabinet to some degree.
Well, they all took the same oath to uphold the Constitution and protect and defend, But when you watch their cabinet meetings and you watch them go around the table and each one praise dear leader, they're the greatest president we've ever had because of this, that,
leadership
the
is
other.
outstanding.
Yeah, they're ignoring their oath.
It's a cult. It's a cult behavior, and you're right. They're ignoring their oath, and it's to our detriment. I mean, they should be held more accountable. We tend to, everyone kind of blames Trump because he's crazy and he's sick and all that, and he is. But these people that know better, and just they don't want to get on his bad side. So they'll do whatever he says.
A pretty strong word to use, cult. But in fact, I realize how right you are when I heard right after the Preddy shooting, Andrew the barber came on and he said right here on this station, he said, I saw the gun in his hand. And after we saw the New York Times second by second breakdown, we realized the guy never touched his gun during his altercation. He had a phone in one hand and his other hand was empty. And yet this cult is so strong, it can compel people to see things that they literally never saw and believe that climate change is a hoax when we literally can see the temperature getting warmer every year. It also causes the stronger blizzards and the heavier winters. So you're right. It is a cult. It is simply a cult where these people are oblivious to all of the crime that this guy commits, all the lies he tells. I don't know what endears them to such a corrupt president.
Chris Christie was on with Bill Maher recently, and Chris Christie was saying, I speak out against the president. And a lot of these senators and congresspeople come up to me out of the public and say, hey, thanks for doing that. You're right. And Bill Maher said, who? Give me a name. Yeah. And he said, and Christie kind of backed up, and then he said, okay, I'll give you one. Lindsey Graham. Yeah. So every time you hear Lindsey Graham get up on his soapbox and preach about something, know that he's lying through his teeth, that he doesn't believe any of that stuff, but he's doing it because I don't know what Donald Trump has on him, but it's got to be something incredible.
And all these decisions revolve around the same thing. What is going to make Trump money? Every decision he makes in this term and in the first term revolved around the singular question, what's in it for me? So he's trying to pay off these oil companies for helping him get in office. He doesn't care about the environment. He doesn't care how many potential refugees are going to need to move as it gets too hot to live where they live. He doesn't care. It's just what's in it for me. Guess what? We have a caller. Steve is on the line. Steve, thanks for checking in with us.
Morning, Steve.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I like to talk. I apologize. I haven't been able to listen to the show, but I like to talk about the exorbitant attention to the halftime show at the Super Bowl, which is really billed as a sporting event, but I think it's really more like a cultural event, a national holiday. And the irony seems to me that even the fans of the two teams that were there, I'm a little in favor of the Seahawks because my brother lives in that area. Almost none of those fans could afford to go to that game. That is a rich boys and rich girls party. And the fact that some commentary focused on the extra interest to the Puerto Rican dilemma and Bad Bunny being the star, I found it really almost humorous that they objected to that it was all in Spanish when a large portion of the country now speaks Spanish. So that just seems kind of weird to me.
Do you think Trump might cut Puerto Rico loose so we don't want you as a territory anymore?
Yeah, I mean,
see if he can trade it for Greenland or something.
Yeah, I've got family there, so I'm a little partial to it. But
well, Trump's made some statements, Steve, where I don't think he understands that Puerto Rico is an American territory, that you are part of the United States. You mentioned the halftime, and I wasn't a big fan of either team, and it gets so much attention. But one of the things I thought was interesting interesting from a football standpoint was it's a challenge for those coaches because the halftime is so damn long that they have to those players are ready to get back on the field, and so it is a real issue for them that they have to keep those players in that locker room much longer than the norm.
I thought that it was a masterful production by Bad Bunny. He gave everybody a history lesson of what has happened in Puerto Rico, going back to the colonization of it when it started out in the sugarcane fields, and then he touched upon some political things along the way, including the Trump's handling of mishandling of the repowering of after the major hurricane that went through there and wiped out all of the electrical grid. Remember him going down and throwing paper towels to the people there. Mm-hmm. What they should have done is completely reimagine the entire electrical grid and put lines underground and gone to solar and it was a test case for if you could start over in the 21st century with the state of the art, how would you do it? And instead, he put up the poles and did a haphazard job of it. So, the idea that Bad Bunny sings in Spanish didn't matter the Grammys. They gave him Album of the Year. So,
did Trump criticize the choice of Bad Bunny? He's always criticizing something.
Yeah, he did. And right-wing media came along and said, well, he should have been trying to come up with a program that would unite the country, and he's dividing it. And one of the comics on the Daily Show says, wait a minute, isn't there somebody else that's supposed to unite the country? Yeah. Well, thanks for calling,
thank you, Steve. Have a good morning.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Even in a presidential term drowning in self-dealing, the lawsuit that Crooked Donald filed against the Internal Revenue Service last week is so brazen, so shameless, so stunning that it would stand out in history. You've probably heard about this. He's suing the Internal Revenue Service for $10 billion because a contractor at the agency leaked documents in 2020 showing that Trump had paid only $750 in federal income taxes that year. The damages would be paid directly to him and his sons. Now, as head of the executive branch, Crooked Donald is essentially both plaintiff and defendant, and his subservient lackeys will no doubt offer him a fat settlement for the disclosure of tax information a presidential candidate should have disclosed himself. You remember he promised he would in 2016. I guess that audit's still going on, which doesn't even affect his ability to release those. He's already recapped multi-million-dollar settlements through nuisance suits against big media companies, which carry the implicit message, pay me now, or I'll use the power of the federal government to punish you. The rest of us call that weaponizing the government, don't we? In just the past year, Trump's self-dealing schemes, including his cryptocurrency, as we've already pointed out, netted him $3.4 billion to $4 billion. Bound by neither principles nor shame, now he's demanding that the American taxpayers open their wallets and give him a payoff of $10 billion. Why? Simply because he can't. That would be like $10 for every man, woman, and child in the country to pay him.
Well, Treasury Secretary Bassett was before a congressional committee recently and had to acknowledge that was coming out of general funds. That was not coming from some special fund out of nowhere. That would come out of the general, the money that taxpayers pay the Treasury.
And so the IRS is going to say, well, we'll settle out of court, right? Because a judge would look at that and say, wait a minute, you promised you were going to release your tax returns. What's the problem here?
Not only that, he bragged about the fact that he only paid $750 in tax. He said, anybody that pays more than that is a sucker and a loser, because he thought it was something that made him out to be a brilliant businessman for taking advantage of all of the deductions that he was able to take under the tax code. And so how is he damaged at all? He thought it was a good thing.
Real patriot.
I'd say take it to trial, buddy.
Real patriot.
Which you're
really
right, it
supports
will
the
not
country.
happen because they all are just under his thumb. But to say he's owed $10 billion is just where's the line? Is there a line somewhere that some Republicans say is enough? Not that I've seen.
Every time you and I were involved in a court case, even if there was liability, you had to prove what your damages were. And how is he going to prove $10 billion worth of damage to anything?
But isn't that
you
the
can't
point?
just pull a figure out of the air. In a real court, you have to show that, how those were approximately caused by the injury.
But isn't he banking on the IRS agreeing to settle with him so
correct.
it never goes to court?
He knows his case will never go to trial, and his minions, his toadies, will settle, which is a complete conflict of interest, by the way.
Total, yeah.
Well, that should be grounds for impeachment of Scott Bessent.
We have one more.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, Steve's
another caller.
What were you going to say, Kevin?
No, I was just going to
Bessent?
say we have a caller. I was just saying Bessent had acknowledged that was coming out of the General Treasury.
Oh, it is. Steve, you there?
Yes.
Hey,
Your
Steve.
dime.
Well, hey, great show. And you're like every week, I mean, you guys bring up the inconvenient facts and truth about Mr. Trump, the administration, et cetera, et cetera. I listen to this show every week. Sometimes a little like a high fiber diet or flossing twice a day. You just, it's right. It's what you should do, but it's tough. And so as I was listening to the show this week, I thought to myself, well, Kevin's a lawyer. Kevin's a friend of mine. And we have another lawyer, I think, on the show. There's a lot of lawyers. And I was just thinking to myself when somebody on the show mentioned something about all the whatabouts that you hear. Whenever you say something that's objectively true, not subject to dispute, and really wrong, okay, what you hear is what about? And I flashed on something. Remember when you started high school, depending on where you went to high school, it was 9th or 10th grade. For me, it was 10th grade. My son went to Plant. It was 9th grade. And the coaches, the teachers, the journalists, they sort of take a look at the incoming students and encourage them to participate. And I remember I was trying to decide, because I'm not an athletic guy. I was trying to decide between debate and the newspaper. And so I was invited by the debate coach, Mr. Kroll, to sit in on a couple of their weekly meetings. And I was polite and respectful, eventually decided to go with journalism. But what I was struck with was all these intelligent, yappy kids filling out index cards with sentences from Newsweek, Time, Life, some local expletive deleted paper, and presenting it, and they got a point. It had nothing to do with truth. The most you could say was about rhetoric. And that's what we get from this administration. It's not, let me respond to what it is you say I did and that I in fact did. It's either denial or it's what about. And
very good point, Steve.
Yeah, but my debate coach, I remember this, because a lot of debate coach, and I apologize to anybody who did debate and all that stuff, but virtually all of them went to law school if they could make the LSAT. And the debate coach that wanted me to be, I wanted to be on the newspaper, but he was one of those guys that he really wanted to be a lawyer, but he ended up as a debate coach. For folks like Miss Bondi, and from people I know who are credible, who are liberals just like me, who have had interactions with her in the past, they have nothing but good things to say about her. So how did she get jammed up in this?
Yeah, I'm wondering what they would say about her performance yesterday, Steve. They may still praise her, but I'd be interested in that.
Well, I think most of us who practice law, depending on where we practice, et cetera, we're accustomed to, if you will, local lawyers.
Right.
Making noise rather than cogent arguments that proceed in a linear, logical fashion based on agreed upon premises consistent with precedent. Instead, we scream. And that's what she did. That's I guarantee you, she mentioned Mr. Trump being the greatest president in American history 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah, but what's the old saying that if you're a lawyer and the facts are on your side, you pound the facts. If the law is on your side, you pound the law. If neither are on your side, you pound the table.
And hope to the
Exactly.
and you hope to the deity that comforts you that you have pleased Mr. Trump.
Well, that's exactly who she was performing for yesterday.
So thanks for letting me rant. I hope I brought a little levity to it, because there's an awful lot of lawyers and other folks in this administration. Their reach greatly exceeds their grasp, and they're just over their heads.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, Steve. We appreciate you listening as well. That's also helpful.
All right.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
So my question to both of you then is the Pam Bondi's future, because we've heard the rumors that Trump is a little disappointed with her because she isn't weaponizing the Justice Department enough. But after yesterday's performance, do you think he may decide, well, yeah, I'm going to keep her around because if I let her go, that indicates I made a mistake and I'm too perfect to make mistakes?
Yeah, I don't know. Who would he replace her with? I mean,
He
she's
can find another toady, can he?
She is. Is there a bigger toady
How
than
about,
she is?
yeah, what about, what's her name? The judge over there on the other coast?
The federal district judge. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
Well, he's
about.
grooming her for the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I don't think many people, I mean, there can be a lot of toadies, but I'm not sure they all can replicate her righteous indignation that she kept showing to this committee with, how dare you ask me that question? But she didn't get rich as working for the state attorney's office here in Tampa. She's made a lot of money with the Ballard. Brian Ballard's a lobbyist who's a lawyer up in Tallahassee. She's made a lot of money there. I'm sure she's fine financially.
Yeah, she originally, when she was asked to be attorney general, said no. And Trump leaned on her because, remember, Matt Gaetz was going to be was his first choice, who couldn't get out of the starting gate with the Senate. And so she said no. I think recognizing that she was way over her skis, to even think about being able to handle that job. But she did it. And I bet she's really wondering, gee, maybe I should have stayed with Ballard and made a lot of money and just kept my.
Well, one question I would ask her if I were on that committee was, Miss Bondi, is there anything Trump would tell you to do that you would not do? And see what the answer was to that question. I'm sure she wouldn't answer it.
She'd say crime in your district is at an all-time high. How dare you ask me that? But it seems to me she just wants to be in that culture of being around all these powerful people, the most powerful people in the world. And she'll prostitute herself to any extent necessary to be there.
I love that one that she attacks these members of Congress for crime in their district, as if they are the prosecutor in that district that could do anything about it. She's the one that controls the prosecutors in those districts that could do something about it.
But you're right, Ed. She goes back to Tallahassee and she's not getting everyone kissing her ass. You saw when she walked into the Congress yesterday, there were about 20 people all around her. So she would not have that. She will be fine financially.
And then, of course, Trump fired all the inspectors general. So they complain about the blue states that are the high crime areas. He doesn't want to be inspected himself or any of his cabinet members. That's why he did that. He doesn't care about law and order.
But she did not answer one question of consequence. Not one. Not one would she answer. And you can't run a railroad that way. You can't. There's a function for Congress to oversight over the DOJ that can't happen when you have that stonewall.
Because her job is to protect these guys in the cabinet who were mixed up with Epstein and to try to get this thing put to bed so no more evidence comes out. Isn't that right?
That's what she thinks her job is.
That's not her job, but that's what she thinks her job is. That's right.
That's what she thinks it is.
Yeah. Well, I think she'll stay on the rest of his term as long as he's around and then get a pardon at the end of the term.
We shall see.
Quote of the day is from a fellow named Walt Whitman. He said this: "There is no week or day nor hour when tyranny may not enter upon this country, if the people lose their roughness and spirit of defiance. Well, you stay right where you are, because we're going to hear news from CBS, national and international news. And we'll be back again next Thursday morning at 9 o'clock for another edition of The Voice of Reason. My co-hosts today were Gary Gibbons and Kevin Carey. Now I'm Ed Golly, reminding you, if the statement seems a little bit too implausible to be true, don't believe it just because a conservative said it.
Make them prove it.
Remember,
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
Listen.